Phelps. I served in Guatemala from 2005 to 2007. And I was a municipal development volunteer, and I worked in a municipality called San Raimundo, which is in the department of Guatemala, so pretty close to the capital city compared to some
And
of
the
other
capital
sites.
city is?
Guatemala City.
Guatemala. Okay. Now, with that, I'd like to go back and have you tell me about your family and your family background long before you joined the Peace Corps.
Sure. Starting with whomever, my parents, my grandparents, whatever. Okay.
Grandparents, if you want to, or parents.
I think I'll start with, let's see, that's a good question. It may be non-linear. My parents, my dad is from Oklahoma. He's from Norman, so that's why I'm here. I'm not originally from here. He grew up in Norman. His dad taught law at OU, in the OU Law School for a long time, up until like 1990 or something. And his mother was a homemaker and a nurse as well, but was full-time homemaker. My mother her father was in the Army, like a career Army person. I'm not super well-termed on all the terms, but and her mother was a nurse, and they were all born in the U.S. On my mom's side, they were born to immigrants from Norway, Germany. I think that's it. Those are the main ones as far as the family lore goes. And then my parents met, actually, they were both stationed in Japan because they were my mother was an officer, an Army nurse officer in the Army, and my dad was an enlisted guy, and so they were
So she was the boss
she
right
was the
away.
boss. They had a covert relationship, apparently. They shouldn't have done it, apparently.
Yes,
but.
that's right.
But they were in Japan for a couple years and met there, and then continued their courtship, I guess, until they moved back here. And
What were the years they lived in Japan?
oh gosh, I want to say 70 or 69 to 71, something like that. I think they were married in 72. That sounds right. So it might have been 68 to 70. And so they moved back to the U.S., eventually got married, and my dad had a history degree and
History, did you say?
history and journalism. And my mom was a nurse, as you heard already. So my dad, once I got married, my dad got this job offer because they were just footloose and fancy free, kind of as a childless couple. And they moved. He found a job offer in this small town in Arizona, Thatcher, Arizona, which is where I was born, or where I grew up.
What's it called?
Thatcher.
Thatcher, never heard of it.
Hatcher.
What's it near?
It's near Safford, which usually people haven't heard of either, but it's about 2 hours outside of Tucson and about 3 or 4 hours outside of Phoenix. And it's in southeast Arizona.
So it's out in the boonies,
It's
right?
out there, yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of high desert, but it gets pretty hot in the summertime, but not like Phoenix. And so he worked at a community college there, and he found a job that he stayed with until he retired.
What did he teach there?
He taught journalism, writing, photography, and then eventually he became full-time on the public administration side of things and sort of their public information officer at the time, way back then. Now I look at the communications department's places and I'm like, wow, that was a one-person job back then for a whole thing, and now there's
A whole...
social media, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, so that's my family in a nutshell. I have one sister, 2 years older. She currently works in Washington, D.C.
And her name?
Is Kristen.
Kristen? How do you spell that?
Kristin. And her last name is the same as mine, which is Phelps, Phelps.
And does she Does she have a government job? Is that why she's in D.C.?
Yeah, she does actually. She works for the Library of Congress.
Oh, I used to go to the Library of Congress all the time.
Well, if you're ever there, if you're around and she's around, I'm sure she'd love to meet you. She works in the digitization program.
Mm-hmm.
So
I know right where that is.
okay.
I've been all around and through the Library of Congress looking for documents.
Oh, how cool!
Oh yeah, it's just
Yeah.
that reading room is fantastic. Absolutely, I could spend the whole day in that reading room just looking up.
I've gone to the public tour sites, but I haven't been inside the building. But
You haven't?
no,
Gotta go.
I know that they have a garden, not a farmer's garden, but they have a vegetable garden
Mm-hmm.
that they kind of keep, but it's available to the public, kind of. But I think it's
Yeah. I
kind
know
of
where that
not
is.
a big, not publicized widely. So that's what I did get to see at the Library of Congress when I visited there.
Okay. Well, I don't go there anymore, or I certainly would, and look her up, because I needed all the help I could get. I just felt like I was almost helpless sometimes in these huge buildings and stacks of documents and card catalogs back in those days. Daunting.
Yeah, I heard about her having to go find files, and it's a whole process of filling out paperwork. Somebody else has to go retrieve the files sometimes because she doesn't work in the stacks.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay.
So I can imagine.
Now, is there anybody in your family that you feel like had any influence on you when you decided to look at the Peace Corps?
I think my parents had an influence. So since they both, spent some time overseas, they were always keen for me and my sister to travel, and get to experience the world and see beyond the confines of Thatcher, Arizona.
Did they ever take you on any travels like that, you and your sister?
We did a lot of domestic traveling in the U.S. until I was 18, and then when I graduated from high school, we went on a trip to Europe together. My sister was studying abroad in Greece, and so we went and met up with her and did the family vacation on the train and backpacks and everything.
Did you love it?
I did, yeah. It was great, and then I was already actively seeking out opportunities, I suppose, to go abroad, but
Well, now you haven't gone to college yet.
I haven't gone to college, right?
Okay, but did you think you might go abroad and then do college?
I knew I was going to college, and I would be able to study abroad in college, so there wasn't really the concept of the gap year back then, like there is now.
Yeah.
So I might have been one of those people to do a gap year instead, but I got my fill later on, so I'm okay.
Okay. So then where did you decide to go to college?
So I went to the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did you pick that out from this little burg in Arizona?
Yeah, good question. I wanted to go out of state. I wanted to try a different climate. My sister also was going to a different university, the University of the Pacific Lutheran University, which was also in Tacoma. So that probably influenced me, although I would have never admitted that back then, following my sister.
No, of course not.
Yeah, so it was, it's a small liberal arts college, and the program looked good, but I was more interested in a change of place.
And climate.
And climate, and
view. It's
right,
quite different.
right. Rain all the time versus sun all the time. Yeah.
Yes. Was there anything apart from all of that? Those are great attractions, all of them in themselves. But was there any course of study that really stood out and made you want to go there?
The course that I ended up majoring in, which wasn't really, I was undecided, as was kind of typical at the time, probably still is, but I was considering music. I'm a piano player, and I was in choir and stuff. So I was considering that. I was considering political science. I was interested in doing something international, and there weren't a lot of majors offered back then. Now there's like every single school has international studies. International development is pretty common.
Relations.
Yeah, international relations.
Yeah.
So there was this program that they had, which was part political science and economics and part foreign language.
Oh.
So they called it foreign language international affairs. So I majored in Spanish and international affairs. It's kind of a
that sounds
degree.
Really good. That sounds attractive to me.
Yeah.
Had there been anything like that?
Right. Back then it was, and they had quite a few study abroad programs offered, I guess, for the time. They also, the school is kind of specialized in Pacific Rim. So they had this every 4 years, I think it was every 4 years, offering for the PAC Rim, is what it's called, Pacific Rim, PAC Rim study program, where a class of like 10 or 15 people would go and visit 8-9 different countries and do research and take classes and get credit for it and everything like that. I did not do that, but that's really their flagship program.
How was did you speak another language already?
No, I tried as much as I could in high school to take foreign languages. It was a small public school, so I got to take 2 years of French and 2 years of Spanish. That was what was offered. So.
Did you enjoy either one of them?
Yeah, I really liked that. Languages was something else I was interested in potentially majoring in, and I ended up majoring in. So yeah, I like languages. I like grammar. I like patterns. I was considering math back then. I liked math and the patterns and the definition, the black and white and stuff related to math, I guess.
Well, that all sounds much to your good, all of that. I mean, considering why we're here and what we're going to be talking about. Yeah. So in college, you studied, what did you call it again?
Spanish and international affairs.
Okay. Is that what it was identified in the catalog as?
It was foreign language international affairs. So you could do, German, Spanish, French, Chinese, maybe there was Japanese. There were not tons and tons of languages offered.
Why did you choose Spanish? Because you already had a working knowledge of it?
Yeah, it seemed practical in terms of applying to things that were in the U.S. I grew up in a community where there was a lot of Spanish spoken, and I didn't, I wasn't a native speaker or anything like that back then. I approached it at some point, not anymore though. So yeah, it seemed, and I also had exchange student friends from high school. I had a Spanish exchange student friend. Oh,
excellent.
Yeah.
That helped, didn't it?
Yeah, that helped. And so I was just excited to visit Spain, Europe, and so Spanish seemed like the good.
When did you start talking about, when did you first find out about Peace Corps? When did you find out that it exists?
I think I was, a child, sort of marginally. My parents remind me sometimes about, so-and-so we knew when you were a kid was a Peace Corps volunteer or something. So I remember there was a woman in our community her name was Penny Rux, and she had been in the Peace Corps in, we think, Kenya, but somewhere in Africa. We don't even actually remember quite. But, and she had her kids there, which by my time, there was no, you could go as a married couple, I think, but, there was no opportunity to have kids while you're in the Peace Corps or anything like that.
Not supposed to.
Yeah. No. But at some point they tried it out, and so that was interesting. And so I probably heard about it pretty early, and then I remember those Peace Corps, the toughest job you'll ever love commercials. And JFK in the background, right? It was like, his voice was playing. So
I ask this because I'm a completely different generation than you, and I had no idea that people of your generation even took note at all of Peace Corps, because it wasn't as popularly mentioned as it had been in the 60s.
yeah, it was. I had marginal exposure to it, I guess.
But you didn't know of PCV other than that one you just mentioned.
Not that I can recall, yeah.
And did you know that PCV?
I did. Of course, she was a grown-up and I was a child.
So you didn't have much in common.
No, but she had like this independent bookseller business. She had like very different and memorable characteristics because she was, in our small town, but she was doing things that weren't part of the normal economy and stuff like that. So she was memorable from that part. And I'm like, oh yeah, I can see her being in the Peace Corps now.
Uh-huh. But you didn't talk to her about Peace Corps?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I doubt it. Because I would have been like 6 or 7, probably.
No,
8.
no.
Yeah. And she didn't talk to us about it that I can remember.
But by college, you were what? I don't want to put words in your mouth. By college,
I was kind of thinking about it. Also, I guess my high school English teacher was also decided that at the end of the year she was teaching me for senior English that she was going to go to Lithuania for the Peace Corps. And so I remember her sort of telling our class a little bit about that. So that was another point of entry. I was like, well, that sounds interesting and cool. I forgot about that, or I hadn't really thought about that. And then I went into college, and Peace Corps wasn't really necessarily my number one thing on my list.
What was?
Probably more international. I was trying to figure out what kind of international work I wanted to do, which there's so much. But you
settled on international work. You just didn't know what kind.
Right. It could have been business. It was having the opportunity to travel and have the cultural exchange. So that was it.
All right. Did you have friends who were like you, interested in this kind of future?
I did. In undergrad, some of my other friends were international affairs majors, or they studied abroad. I also remember in college going to a presentation about the Peace Corps that they offered for students, and it sounded really hard to get into. Also,
like the Peace Corps was very. Mm-hmm. What made it sound so hard? Do you recall at all?
It must have been a recruiter that was giving a presentation, and it was like, you need to have education, you need to have we really want work experience, we want serious people. I mean, it just felt like a very high bar for somebody where I was at. I wouldn't be qualified for it. So they did a good job of screening.
Well, I don't know. It sounds like he was almost dissuading people from applying.
Yeah, I mean,
top this, top that, top that. Can you meet those? Well, no.
Yeah, but I didn't. I didn't bite at that time, and I did more before I went to Peace Corps. I went to grad school and stuff.
Did you talk to that recruiter at all at that point?
No, just went and listened to the presentation and maybe stayed for the Q&A. And I don't know if anybody else that was at that presentation, if anybody ended up going into the Peace Corps right away. When I look at my alumni magazine that comes in, sometimes I see, so-and-so was returned Peace Corps volunteer. And I think at some point my university, UPS, University of Puget Sound, was had pretty high head count of
is that
alumni.
Right?
Yeah.
For a small place like that?
It was odd because it wasn't like a big thrust of the programming per se back then. So I was like, okay.
But there's a lot who have graduated from there and gone on to Peace Corps service.
That's what they told me, yeah. That's,
Huh.
that's what I understood.
That's pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
So when during your college years did you get more serious about that Russian, or did you not?
I think I was, I wasn't focused that way. I was still trying to figure out how can I do this international work. And so I knew that one of the things I needed to do was improve my foreign language skills.
Mm-hmm.
So once I graduated, I pretty much knew I wanted to go to some Spanish-speaking country on my own. And
What year did you graduate?
I graduated in winter of '99. I say that because I finished a semester early, so I was really the class of 2000. But
You were in a hurry?
yeah, I was ready to get out. It was an expensive school, and I had been able to use some college credits from that I got for free because of the community college in my town. So got some of those credits out of the way. So that was good.
Good.
Yeah. And let's see. So I looked for jobs to overseas, and the easiest thing was like teach English without any work experience, or like my college job was playing the piano for a church service. So I didn't have any sort of office skills or thing to put on a resume. And so I looked for opportunities, and the one that I ended up landing on was teaching English for a language school in Venezuela. So I went to Caracas for like a year.
Who hired you?
It was a company called it still exists, I think, called InLingua, INLINGUA. They're no longer in Venezuela, but it was just sort of like a, what do you call it? The usual language school that people do the immersion in when they're grown ups.
Oh, okay. I know what you mean.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So I found opportunities online. They were available back then, sort of. It was few and far between. It was nowhere as organized as it is now to find international job opportunities, or job opportunities really. But Monster, and I don't even know how I found it. Just searching for like jobs, teaching English, and ESL job websites were available then, I guess. And that was what a lot of people my age were probably doing.
And you said that you were in Venezuela for a year?
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
It was really cool. I had an amazing time. I was in Caracas. And it was just really great. A great opportunity, and I fell in love with Latin America, so to speak, and I'm like, no more with you, Spain. I want to focus on the developing world, I guess, a little bit more. That was one of the pivotal moments. And walking around, like, the economy there. It was back when Chavez was still the president and still alive, and Maduro wasn't even in the picture at all or anything. And it was before there was like an attempted coup or
so
whatever.
So it wasn't a violent country at that time when you were there?
No, it was supposed to be dangerous for like petty theft and carjackings and things like that, but it wasn't. There wasn't like the drug trafficking, and there were issues with the Colombian border, but not like I hear about now.
Gangs?
Yeah, not gangs.
Yeah.
I mean, a little bit, but that was more like the internal economic status in the country, which I guess is still the case. But so, yeah, I just loved the culture. The people were so warm and friendly and welcoming. To apply a lot of, generalizations, but it was just really nice. People were so interested in and curious about why was I there, and willing to help me work on my Spanish. And
so how did that go, working on your Spanish for a year with them?
It went pretty well. So I taught English, and then I also would get like as an exchange, I would get like a living stipend, and I got some free Spanish classes every week. And my Spanish improved somewhat. And also while I was there, I was like, okay, I want to expand my reach. And so I found a job or volunteer position. I went around knocking on doors at the UN organizations or the global organizations and be like, hey.
In Caracas?
Yeah, hey, can you use my skills? And people were just kind of like, okay. But at one place at UNICEF, which is no longer, I don't think they have an office there anymore either. I talked to the right person who was like, you know what, we could use some translation skills. We're trying to translate a document. Could you help us with that? So that was an amazing opportunity. It was unpaid, but that was also what it was back then, unpaid stuff.
But you were getting what you needed.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so my Spanish improved a little bit. My confidence probably improved a little bit. And then when I came back, can I move to that next step? Mm-hmm. When I came back after that year, I actually had applied for a job at the U.S. Embassy there, and was pretty close to getting the job, like I was told anyway, and it's pretty far along in the hiring process. And
in Caracas,
at the U.S. Embassy, and and then 9/11 happened, and everything just sort of fell out, and that didn't happen. And so then I went back to looking for jobs. I thought I was going to go back to Venezuela, but I didn't. I stayed in Arizona, living with my parents for a little while.
And you think 9/11 did that?
I think it was one of the catalysts in the particular funding sources and
just an
all the
upheaval,
bureaucracy.
wasn't it?
I think so.
Yeah.
That was my best guess. And they could have had internal hiring, a lot of things, but 9/11 happened around the time where they're like, hey, this isn't going to work out.
How did you learn about 9/11?
I was in the U.S. by then.
Oh, it didn't happen while you were there. Oh,
right.
Okay.
I had been back from Venezuela for like a month or something.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Huh. I think it would have been a whole different ball game had you heard about it there.
Yeah.
Because I've interviewed volunteers who were in their country when 9/11 occurred.
Yeah.
Created havoc everywhere.
I'm sure it would have been,
yeah,
really scary.
But you were back in the U.S.
Uh-huh.
You didn't get the job at the embassy, I take it.
I didn't get the job at the embassy, and so I went back to the drawing board and found a job working at a law firm in Phoenix.
You must have been pretty put out by that time, working at a law firm in Phoenix rather than...
Yeah, it was kind of like, okay, I got to go back and live with my parents until I figure it out, and then I have to go live in Phoenix and work for a law firm. And I was the selling point on that job was bilingual legal assistant. So I got to use my Spanish, and that's really where my Spanish got a lot better.
A lot better in that job. Huh.
I was forced to use Spanish with Spanish-speaking clients and translate conversations and interpret, translate documents, interpret conversations, etc. So, yeah, that was a great impetus to be like, okay, got to get your act together, Alice. And I had all the, a lot of the knowledge and skills, but it was just a more focused approach, I guess.
Now, had you ever been a teacher of any kind?
No, just the English teachers, but nothing in a classroom. Yeah.
No experience really in teaching?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right.
Yeah.
How long were you at the law firm?
So I was there for about a year. And then in the meantime, I was like, as you said, as you alluded to, I was like, I'm not super thrilled to be in this position, but whatever. What can I do instead? I got to get back to Latin America.
Yeah.
So I found, and I mean, making these life decisions was always a struggle, and it continues to be a struggle for me. What's the next step in your life to take? You have so many options.
You didn't look at it as an invigorating challenge. You looked at it as, God damn, now I got to do this again.
Right.
Mm.
Start over. And I'm sure I did a lot of journaling and like self-work on, I did a lot of those, you know, what color is your parachute type of books and self-exercises and working on my, I think I probably took the Foreign Service Officer exam while I was in Phoenix. I didn't pass that, or called back or whatever. But what I ended up doing after all of this research was to go to Brazil for 6 months.
What? How did you go to Brazil?
So I was interested in expanding my foreign language capacities, I was like, well, I have Spanish under my belt. You know, a little bit cocky, but you know, I was pretty, you know, had some concrete experience, and I was like, so Portuguese is another language that is spoken in Latin America, so.
Well, you didn't know that too, did you?
No, I didn't. But to justify going to, you know, something that was going to be self-funded, I had to sort of be like, okay, I'll be learning something that will build my resume and gain experience, etc. So, and I went to the Pontificia Universidade Católico do Rio de Janeiro. So in Rio, it was a Catholic university. And they had a Portuguese for Foreigners course there. And so I just started learning Portuguese, which is, especially for the beginner, very similar looking to Spanish. So I was able to get into test a little bit higher for that immersion course. And it was at a university. And so that was really great. And I also got involved in a lot of extracurricular things at the university. And I also taught English while I was there as a volunteer. They had...
Now, where was this?
This was in Rio de Janeiro.
Okay.
And as part of that teaching English, I worked... it was with this like student-run like NGO, and they would work in the favelas, you know, the slum neighborhoods, teaching English and doing like community programs for children, usually. Sometimes it was for adult learners.
Teaching English in slums to children?
And doing outreach to slums, like in different ways, I guess. But the main way I could contribute was teach English. So that was a really cool opportunity.
Did those kids see learning English as a way out, or was just another thing that they had to do?
Probably a combination, and it was like an after school program, so maybe their parents saw it as a way out for them. I mean, I think generally people encourage their children to learn another language, and if
over there they do, not here.
Okay. Present company excluded.
Yeah.
But yeah, so generally in non-English speaking countries, I can qualify that, like they encourage their kids to know more than one language, and English is, especially back then, it was a business language. I know Chinese is kind of making me stop and pause every once in a while, if that's what the new language is going to be. But English is still going to be really important for a really long time. So yeah, I think the kids, some of them probably were old enough to sort of recognize. I think all the kids there recognized it as a cool opportunity. You know, because they got attention, if nothing else, from some grown-ups or people that...
So how long were you in Rio?
So I was there for 6 months, and then I came back to the U.S., and by that time I had applied to grad school.
In what?
Well, that was also, I decided after much soul searching to do international affairs. And I wanted to focus on developing countries because I think it was the experience in Brazil and Venezuela that opened my eyes a lot more. And
you had some real experience.
Yeah.
Unlike a lot of people who major in that and don't have any. Right.
I didn't really find the developed world that interesting anymore, like European politics and stuff.
Yeah.
But that was what the focus of my undergrad was on, because that was kind of what was available for the most part. I did take back to college, I took a Latin American Studies class that also had a lot of influence on my thinking of the world, I guess. So I ended up applying for international affairs, and I went to Florida State University in Tallahassee. So back to the sunny country.
Yeah.
And I once I got there, I kind of decided in my first week there that I wanted to switch departments and programs to urban and regional planning, because they had the Peace Corps International program. They had a focus area under urban and regional planning that was for planning for developing areas, and whereas the International Affairs program didn't really have an international development bent at that time. They probably do now, but back then they didn't. That was, I matriculated in 2003, I think. So it may be different now. But so yeah, so I did that.
You said Peace Corps International was a form of study, or an option?
It was an option. Are you familiar with it? So it's this, and I'm assuming it's still, or Masters International. I think it's still around, but it might not be. And it was Peace Corps had set up in different higher education institutions, including Florida State, this opportunity to combine your master's degree, your graduate studies, with Peace Corps experience.
Oh, okay.
And so there was, the recruiter was in the Peace Corps recruiter in the area was in my program also, and he had been hired, he was a RPCB from Albania, I think? Bulgaria. And he was a student with me, and he was a recruiter, and he was also like paid by a fellowship through the Peace Corps. So it was a way to sort of recoup your cost, possibly if you timed it all right. Like you could be a Peace Corps volunteer and then come back and have your studies paid for as a fellow. I did not do that, but that's the way it sort of worked.
Were you tempted?
I would have. I finished grad school before I went, so not so much. Part of me, yes, because I wouldn't have to make any more decisions or find a job right away. But yeah. And so I did that, and that was I loved the graduate program. It was really interesting, and I appreciated that it was more organized than economic theory. Like it was more of a practical application, which I appreciated. And I appreciated having some job experience or some world experience before going back to school and then going into the Peace Corps. And what else? In grad school, I also, one of the organizations I really wanted to work at was the Carter Center. And so I found an internship there that I did for one summer.
Where is the Carter Center again?
In Atlanta.
Yeah, that's right.
Atlanta, Georgia.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you really wanted to work there?
I did. For my Latin American Studies class, I really admired Jimmy Carter's post-presidency and his presidency, which I know is like possibly controversial, but I really appreciated, his international outreach post-presidency with all the programs that he and his wife had promoted. And
did you apply?
I applied. Yep.
You get in?
I got in. So I was in Atlanta. It was a summer intern. I worked on the elections program, because that's one of the things that the Carter Center, I think they still do, like election observation program.
Oh, in foreign countries? Developing countries?
That's right.
Yeah.
And so they send.
And so did you do that?
Delegation. I got to go to Indonesia with that.
During an election time? Oh, great.
Be an election observer, basically, or staff to it. But it was exposure. I got to meet the Carters on multiple times during that.
Wow.
Had my picture with them multiple ways, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Oh, that just sounds tremendous.
Yeah.
And what was that experience, just briefly, in Indonesia like during the election?
So I went for like just 2 weeks. Most of the time I was based in the U.S.
Oh.
leading up to it, and it was during, a week before the election happened, and then a couple days after the election happened was the span of time I was there. But so my job while I was there was to do coordination for this whole delegation of all these people that came in to participate on it. So that was the Carters, and then they had like another high-level delegate from a former prime minister from Thailand, who I can't recall his name right now. And so then he brought some people from his administration, I guess. And then there were also a couple of representatives that were invited, former ambassadors. So it was pretty high level. It was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
So it was corralling, and then like people from think tanks like Brookings and I think Heritage Foundation was there, like, so across the aisle.
Sounds like a bunch of eggheads.
Yeah, possibly. But it was a lot of, coordination, making sure that the guests or the parts of the delegation were, knew where to be, when to be there, what to do, etc.
Was it a peaceful election?
It was. It was a peaceful election, and
with reasonable candidates running?
I think probably at the time, yes. Or probably now in retrospect, yes. At the time, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the point of the Carter Center was to be impartial.
Yes.
So
I remember.
there was not a ton of a big reason to try and make an assessment for yourself, because I wasn't voting, and that wasn't really my role in that particular thing.
Well, I'll tell you, I am very impressed with all of this experience that you were getting.
Thanks.
And before the Peace Corps, you're the most experienced person I think I know I've interviewed prior to Peace Corps. So,
Well, thank you.
well,
That's good.
it's amazing, and all these for somebody also who says they don't like to make decisions and has a tough time with options. It seems like you made a lot of really good decisions. Either that, or you were just lucky.
Yeah, no, it was good decisions, but they were heart-wrenching decisions and sacrifices of sort of taking another free gig or moderately paid gig to sort of hope it will play out going forward.
As you did this, though, taking these gigs, did you see how the part was contributing to the whole?
Yes, it was still...
This wasn't a waste of time.
No, not at all. It definitely... I can explain my story to you very well now. But yeah, it definitely still felt sort of like parts, but there was a lot more of trying to piece it together into Peace Corps applications and job applications, and before that grad school applications, etc.
So when did you apply to the Peace Corps?
So I applied during, I guess, my last semester in grad school through the Master's International Program. My advisor, who's retired now, Petrodone, she was an RPCV, and she had been in Togo. And so she was she was a big proponent of Peace Corps, so that was another influencing figure.
You talked to her a lot?
A fair amount, yeah, and she'd always, she had a lot of international experience, not only from Peace Corps, but she had a lot of, practical experience, and...
So a great mentor for you.
A great mentor, that's right.
Right before you went in.
That's right.
Couldn't be a better way, I don't think.
Right. Really to help encourage it and be like, yeah, it'll be okay, Allyson, You're making the right decision.
Yeah.
You can still back out if you want, but I don't think you should, that type of stuff. Yeah.
Huh. Did you ask her questions that she might not want to answer? Like some of the negative things? Like, did you get to a point where you thought, screw it, I'm going home. This isn't worth it? Anything like that?
I think, I mean, I asked, like, if I get there and I don't like it, is that going to look horrible for the rest of my life? And
No.
those kinds of questions. But yeah, like, she's like, no, it's fine. You want to try and stick it out, but there's lots of reasons people don't finish their service or make a change or whatever. So,
So what year did you apply?
so I must have applied in 2005 or 2004, and my application, I think it was like, it felt like a long time. It wasn't like I heard within 2 weeks or anything like that. Like,
It wasn't just a couple of pieces of paper either, was it?
no, I had to interview with the recruiter. He was the representative. I had to do like 1 hour there. I think I did references. I had to do at least one essay, if not more, about why I wanted to be in Peace Corps and probably what skills could I bring, and probably some other things to help give some shape to my application. And I probably had a call with somebody in Washington, Peace Corps headquarters at some point. And there
To
was
answer questions?
to answer questions about the application, or if they had any questions for me, and maybe for me related to if I had a need for the process. Then there was the medical side. I'm just remembering that. I had blocked that out. I think once you get accepted, conditionally accepted, you have to go through medical testing, or maybe I had to do all of that before Peace Corps. I'm getting a little bit confused with Foreign Service because that was the whole
Oh, okay.
But
Yeah.
but so you must have had to do a bunch of the medical tests ahead of time, or you had to pay for them out of pocket, and I had like student
Really?
insurance, and so I was trying to be self-sufficient during that time, and I went to the dental school for my x-rays, because you have to have dental x-rays, and did as much free health care as I could to get some of those things completed.
And you think Peace Corps was requiring this?
They were requiring, yes.
For you to pay out of your own pocket, get all these exams.
Yeah. They
Wow,
wanted to make
that's
you
a
in good
big
condition.
change.
Yeah, to make sure you're not as much of a liability, I'm assuming, is why. If you go there and to your country, and on day 2 you need a root canal or have some major dental problem. And I think there was some reimbursement for part of that, but part of it maybe there was all of it, but you had to pay up front.
Oh, okay.
You didn't have to do any?
No. I didn't
They were
do
trying to-
any medical stuff until I got to the training site. And then there was a lot of medical stuff, but I was already in.
Yeah.
So there was none prior to acceptance.
Yeah.
But there was for you.
There
And
was.
it sounds like it was a lot more complicated for you than it was for me. It was pretty easy.
Yeah, it was pretty formal, I would say, and long, and
Did you ever during the process think to yourself afterwards, oh, damn, boy, I shouldn't have said that. I didn't say that the way I mean it, that kind of thing, and start going, oh, they won't invite me.
yeah, for sure. I mean, on my medical stuff, for example, there was the health form that I guess it was like a physical you had to have a doctor sign off on. And it's like, do you have this condition? Do you have that condition? And one of the things I had in the past, I don't really have it now, but I had asthma.
Yep.
And so that restricted my eligibility. And I didn't learn that until afterwards. I couldn't go to as many countries.
Because you revealed that you had asthma.
Right,
Okay.
right. And I could have, like some of the countries, there's just not enough health care available immediately for some, serious conditions.
Yeah.
And I remember, during, sort of interviewees' remorse when you're like, oh, I should have said it that way instead of this way.
Yeah.
And So there were some things like that, yeah.
Did they ask you what are the 5 countries you'd most want to be assigned to or anything like that?
I think there was a region, and maybe you could list out countries, but there was like the understanding there was no...
Region being Africa, South America, like that?
Like Latin America, Africa, Asia. And it was, I don't think you could list countries, but maybe I found a way that I could do it. Because it was probably an online application. This is what I have remaining from my Peace Corps files. I pulled them out just before you came, in case I needed to, if you wanted to see any artifacts, but it's not too much. But so I wasn't allowed to say, oh, I want to go here. I think I could say Africa, which is where I wanted to go. But since I had asthma, they were like, how about Latin America?
Okay.
Or to the places in Africa that I.
So if you hadn't had asthma, you might have gone to Africa.
Right.
Despite the fact also that you had a lot of Spanish experience and even some Portuguese, where there's no country in Africa that I know of that uses either one of those.
There are, but not very many. So in Peace Corps works in Mozambique, or they used to. And they speak Portuguese there. So I had, done a lot of research, and I'm like, I want to go to Mozambique because...
So that's where you really wanted to go.
Right. But then there was also looking at the career and professional areas where could I make the, biggest impact with my skills and experience. And so Guatemala had kind of better, closer aligned programs, and in Mozambique it probably would have been teaching English again, which I was ready to not teach English, so.
It turned out well for you.
It did.
And how long did it take before they sent you or called you and told you were in? I
think it was probably like 4 or 5 months. It was a while.
A while.
And I had a classmate who also applied and got accepted to the same program, and she heard much more quickly. She delayed her application a little bit, so it's like kind of hit or miss depending on, I think they do rolling applications and stuff like that. So yeah, I got the invitation letter, I guess, around the time I was graduating in June or July, whenever. And
That's a great graduation gift.
Yeah. And then I went out in August of 2005, I think. It was when the weekend of Katrina. That's how I remember it.
Okay.
Whenever that comes up, I'm like, oh, I was out going to Peace Corps. So we did a little bit of like a 1-day or 2-day orientation in Washington with other classes from going to other countries. And
so a large group?
I would say like 100 people, and probably 3 or 4 countries.
But was that known at the time that one over there is going to Mozambique and this one's going to Guatemala?
Yes, we knew where we were going, and we did icebreakers, so we got to know other people a little bit, or had name tags or something.
Could you figure out who was going to be in your group from this 100?
Yes, because of the name tags, or I think we did, break into your smaller groups at some point.
Oh, yeah.
So we got to meet our Peace Corps mates. What do you call them? Site mates, not site mates.
I'm not
our
sure
class.
what it's called.
Yeah, our group there, and then we all flew over together on the same flight.
Now, we're not talking about 100 now. We're talking about your group going to Guatemala.
Guatemala, that's right.
And how many were in that group?
I think there were like 32. Which
And I assume they were from all over.
They were from all over. Mainly trending younger. I was on the older end, and I was 28. I was about to turn 28 at the time.
You
And
would have been a senior
I
member
was
of my
pretty
group.
senior,
Yes.
yeah. Yeah, and there were a couple other people my age actually, and then a lot of people who had just graduated from undergrad
Mm-hmm.
or maybe had graduated and took a year to work and then went to the Peace Corps or something like that probably. But
Was it a pretty collegial group?
yeah, there I would by the end of it I was like, these are my best friends.
Mm-hmm.
It's remarkable because at first you're like, who are these people? Like,
Yeah.
I don't identify with anybody here, and I don't know what we have in common.
I know exactly what you mean, yeah.
But by the end of it, we were really a close-knit group, and we still keep in touch, some more than others, because it's been
Sure.
20 years or whatever, more than 20, almost 20 years, I guess.
So your group went from Washington, D.C. to Guatemala City.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you were going to get your in-service, I guess it was called in-service training in Guatemala.
Right.
I think that's the way to do it. Back in my day, I served in the Philippines, but our training was in Hawaii. That was a big mistake on the Peace Corps' part, because there's nothing third world about the island of Hawaii, the big island of Hawaii. It is gorgeous, and none of us had ever been there before, and we were going crazy. And then when we wound up in Manila, it was totally different, totally the opposite. So I think that was a mistake, but they did too, because they closed down the Hawaii training center a couple of years, I think, after we went through it.
I do like that they try, they continue to sort of like try out different models to see if something works better.
Yeah, they should.
Were you in Hawaii for like 3 months?
10 weeks.
10 weeks, okay. Wow.
10 of the best weeks I ever had in my life. I just
People
loved
are
it.
like, Peace Corps, what?
No, it was like an extended, lavish vacation without money, really. We didn't have any money, but somehow we had enough to get by and have a great time. But anyway, Guatemala City, and how long were you going to be there? Three months?
In the in-service training,
Yeah,
3
in
months.
in-service.
That's right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now describe to me what that was like, the in-service training.
Okay, so for the first 3 months, we had in-service training, which covered language training, cultural training, basically, Guatemalan culture, and area, like our work, or whatever our program was going to be. Mine was municipal development, so it was working in, doing training on what does this actually look like? What are some things I need to know before I go out there? I should be familiar with these laws and these policies, and a lot of, like, not a lot, but some site visits to different municipalities to kind of shadow the volunteers that were already working. And we did some like research, kind of like research projects where we would go and cold call basically different municipal leaders and tell them, hey, we're just sort of like practice what you had to do as a Peace Corps volunteer. They put up with a lot, I guess. But so that was 3 months. I stayed with the host family.
The entire time?
The entire time.
You lived with the host family. You didn't live in a dorm with these other Peace Corps people.
Right.
Okay.
In Guatemala, everybody, I think, probably still lives with the host family, and there are 2 or 3 different towns where people live with families, 1 volunteer per family, and then you walk in or ride the bus or whatever to training every day and come back, and you have your room and board with the host family, and you get your Spanish immersion with the host family, and you get a lot of community integration too. Like, you get invited to weddings and birthday parties and baby showers.
And your host family was in Guatemala City?
They were actually, we were about 40 minutes drive outside of Guatemala City. That's where I think Peace Corps headquarters is actually located now.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, the headquarters were in Guatemala City, and our training facility was outside in Santa Lucia. But now it's all in Santa Lucia, and so we were in like a small village, basically outside of that training center. Like, it was
Small village being 2,000, 3,000?
Yeah, probably 2,000. It wasn't tiny, 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 and I think we had, no, I had to do bucket baths. I don't know if some of the houses had running water though, so it was like a mix of
Did yours?
plumbing. No, I think we did a bucket bath.
How about toilet? Did you have a toilet?
There,
A
gosh.
flush toilet, I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah, maybe there was, but there was a bucket of water beside it because
Because that's how you flush it?
right, and it wouldn't always work, and the water would get turned off and on a lot. So there was water sometimes. I'm sure you're familiar with
No, I am.
that. And so yeah, but I don't think they had running water. I think they went to the pozo or whatever, to the well to get
How about electricity?
They had electricity. I had a cell phone.
You had a cell phone?
I had a cell phone. It was one of the little brick phones, the SMS.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't a smartphone or anything, but you could do
Flip
text.
phone, didn't they
It wasn't
call-
even a flip phone. It was
What
like a
even
flip
that?
phone, but yeah. I think flip phones were fancier then.
Oh.
I loved that phone. It was a Nokia, and it had like a flashlight on it. You just had to press one button. It wasn't like a billion different functions. So
Uh-huh.
yeah.
So municipal development for you, did you choose that or did they choose that for you?
I think I must have at some point said this is the program I'd want to be in. If I were, I think I had when I was applying, it was like, what region, what kind of programs would you want to be in? So then I got placed in that particular program in Guatemala. So it was kind of a
That
little bit of a
suits you
negotiation.
from the beginning?
What's up?
Did that suit you from the beginning to be in municipal development?
Yeah, I was really excited about that because it seemed so relevant to what I had been studying.
Mm-hmm.
And like I could bring some skills or
And
knowledge.
And in your mind, when you thought about municipal development, you didn't think about the development of a city like Caracas or Guatemala City. You thought of these little burgs out in the isolated rural communities, right?
I was wanting to be in a more populated area. And I actually, out of the places I could go in Guatemala, I did get placed in a site that had 15,000 people.
15,000?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So pretty big, quite big. And some people were in like villages with 1,000 people, or spread out communities totaling 2,000 people or something.
Were they all in municipal development too? Even the ones that were in these much smaller places?
Right. And we had like 12 or something volunteers, and each of us got assigned to a municipality. So we all at least worked in an office that had electricity and a computer. I think everybody had a computer.
Work in an office? Mm-hmm. Really? What, was it designated as a Peace Corps office?
No, we worked in the office the planning office within the municipal
development.
like town hall, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
And worked with the mayor, worked with the city council, the equivalent of the city council.
And did you have a plan and format from the beginning about, well, here I am now. I've done research to find out what's planned, what they want to do, and how I can help them, or what? How did that work?
It was there was a lot of suggested programming, I would say. It still felt a little rudderless at times, but they did really give us a lot in terms of training, and these are some things you can do. So basically, the thinking behind my job, the municipal development, was to help socialize communities on their rights and responsibilities related to community development under kind of new laws that help decentralize power to the people in Guatemala. And so we were told, part of the time you should go out and, my title was municipal development consultant. I think that's how I would usually introduce myself in Spanish. And so I was a consultant to the planning office, and we had very qualified planning professionals in the office I worked in.
Who were Guatemalans?
So it was kind of like, okay. They maybe didn't have planning experience, but they were both engineers, or two of them were engineers. One person had a lot of community development experience. So, I don't know how much we accomplished in the end together, but definitely the cultural exchange. And so it was to provide them with training, etc., on these laws and how to work with them. And so some of the illustrative examples of things that we could do would be help them create a city development plan, like a 5-year comprehensive development plan.
Was that your idea or their idea?
That was an idea from Peace Corps, and it was required by the new law. So it was also something that wasn't just like the new laws that they were decentralization laws that had passed as part of the Peace Accords.
Their Congress or legislature, whatever they have there, has passed that law.
That's right.
And Peace Corps was helping to implement it.
Right, to reinforce those. And
great.
Yeah. So there was provide training on different, like how to hold a meeting, how to hold a meeting with your community group, how to, that's putting together an agenda, that's like how to do an icebreaker, things that a lot of people probably attended but maybe had never facilitated. As a Guatemalan, had never facilitated something like that, so I was doing some of that, like capacity building. Another thing I got involved in was with ArcGIS, the mapping software. It still exists, but now we have Google Maps and things like that, but we didn't at the time. And so there was a local distributor of the software in Guatemala City who gave some free licenses for the software to Peace Corps volunteers and their municipalities. So I got some training on that, and then I tried to train my office on how to create some basic maps.
You're talking about Guatemalans. You tried to, okay.
And let's do a map of where all of the wells are, because that kind of data typically existed one way or another, and they could translate it into GIS and then make it look nice on a map. So that was another thing.
And then the maps are distributed to?
They were usually for planning purposes, so they could have been distributed to a community meeting if that was necessary. We didn't get that far with developing maps for broad dissemination, I guess, but it was more like it was more theoretical, I guess.
No. Okay.
But we knew how to create a map. Like if somebody ever said, "Hey, can you get me a quick visualization of what where the schools are?"
Did you have a sense that the people trusted you and your group, or was it kind of not even very important to them in their lives that you and your group even existed?
Like important to the Guatemalans?
Yeah.
In my muni, that's what we called our thing, I felt appreciated, and I felt seen, to use a term that we use nowadays, and I felt a little bit listened to, but not a ton. People were definitely not looking to me for lots and lots of end-all advice, but they were looking to include me in experiences.
Did they have the feeling that they were helping you as well as you were helping them?
I think so, yes. Yeah.
Did you promote that?
I'm sure I did, because, I appreciate it.
Intellectually, did you promote that? This is what I want to do. I want them to understand that they're helping me, and I'm as well as I am helping them.
I don't know if I was that aware, but I definitely, wanted the cultural engagement and exchange, and I did want to learn from them, but I also did think I brought stuff, which was a little naive, I suppose, but I brought that experience and knowledge, and I had something to add, some value to add, I guess. So.
Were you ever confronted by any of the Guatemalans at a meeting or just privately and have them say, in effect, we don't need you. Why are you here? Why are you, that kind of thing? You never did?
I didn't, yeah. They were all very, if nothing else, I was a curiosity. I was a nice person. So it wasn't like I was hard to be around. I don't think,
no,
generally
I'm
speaking.
Sure you weren't.
And so but no, people were just welcoming.
And how much travel did you do in Guatemala?
I visited.
Not just on your job, but because you wanted to. You wanted to see the country.
Right. I did not do as much traveling as some of the other volunteers. We had a policy which was called out of sight or something. Uh-oh, here comes the dog. And so I think once a month we were allowed to be off-site during our, during a weekend. So we could go to Antigua, which is a tourist destination. Or
1 weekend a month, that was it?
That was the handshake agreement. That we were supposed to sort of stick to, unless there was a extenuating circumstance or something like that. So some volunteers did a lot more traveling. I don't think I completely adhered to that policy, but I was not the worst offender either.
Yeah.
But so I went to, there's a lot of great tourist destinations in Guatemala, so I went to all of those. Antigua, Panajachel, which is a lake, beautiful lake, side town. I went to Tikal, where they have Mayan.
Isn't that where Stanley Rother was?
He was in Guatemala, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you know about him when you were there?
I think I knew a little bit, and then since meeting Scott, I got, brought to my mind a bit more, and now I drive by it. Such a beautiful building.
But you didn't talk about him then when you were in Guatemala. They didn't bring him up.
No, yeah.
Well, I think that place you just mentioned is where he was. Atitlan?
Atitlan, okay.
Yeah.
I know I've looked it up before, and that I'm sure.
Oh well.
Yeah. So I visited a lot of places, but not as extensively as some other ones. It's a small place and relatively easy to get around compared to some other countries where Peace Corps is, I would say.
How did you get around?
On the bus. They call it a chicken bus there. And
why do they call it that?
I think it's because they carry crates of live chickens in it to markets. And
well, they do, don't they?
I think so. I don't know.
How do you not know if you rode on those buses?
Well, I didn't always see chickens on the bus. I was always on a chicken bus. And that was kind of promoted by tourists. You would see the t-shirts in English that said, Guatemalan chicken bus
Oh.
and stuff.
Uh-huh.
They didn't call it. They didn't translate it into chicken bus in Spanish.
Yeah.
It was just a camioneta, which was just like a bus.
Okay.
Basically.
So that's how you got around in a chicken bus.
Yeah.
Any other way? Any other transportation?
Some walking. It's not, at the time it wasn't a super safe area in many places because of gang violence, drug trafficking, gang related.
What wasn't?
Being out on your own.
Oh, I see. Away
places.
from where you live.
Away from where I lived.
Yeah. Where you're not known and
Right.
you're a target in the sense that you're an identifiable American.
Totally.
Yeah.
And you stand out and you're at elevated risk for petty theft and assaults and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, chicken bus. My counterparts, that's what we call them, my counterparts that I worked with in the planning office, they had cars. They would commute in from Guatemala City.
Cars.
They actually didn't
Wow.
live there. So sometimes I'd get a ride in a car, get a lift somewhere, to the bus station or to the bus station in Guatemala City or something to catch the bus to somewhere else.
And how far was Guatemala City from your place?
It was like an hour-long bus ride.
Okay.
So pretty close as a crow flies, I guess, but there was lots of hills and winding roads.
What's the name of your community again?
San Raimundo.
Sangamundo.
Raimundo, so like San Raymond, basically. Raymundo.
Okay.
Yeah.
And most of the people that lived there were farmers, subsistence farmers.
There were some, again, because it was closer to the capital, there were commuters into the city. But there was agriculture. There was some subsistence farming, which in the further out aldeas. There was also a lot of, what do you call it, remittances, I was thinking of the Spanish term, where people that come to the U.S. and send money home to their families. There was a lot of money helping to contribute to the development in Guatemala. So
there are a lot of females who don't have partners in the house.
Possibly. It didn't really feel like that
Didn't?
necessarily, but you would see a lot of construction of like really big kind of palatial looking houses being built next to very modest
Yeah.
dwellings, I should say. So, yeah.
So foreign money is building that big palace.
Right. That was what the common working theory was when people would tell me that, or when I'd ask or something like that.
Did you have that job in community development the whole 2 years you were there?
I did. I did that, and I also was a trainer for Peace Corps after
your 2 years?
During it. So I came in and did some training for the new classes that were entering on municipal development, and I was also the gender and development trainer for a while.
What's that mean?
Or maybe I think it was gender and development. So women in development is what it was called at some point, and I think it was gender and development then. So that was a kind of a working group. Well, so there was training for all the volunteers to sort of be aware about the differences between men and women and males and females as cultural constructs.
It's pretty profound, right?
Right. It's changed a lot, though, so that's why I have to feel the definitions and some of gender analysis is even broader now, but it was looking at the differences between men and women, boys and girls, and thinking through how your actions and your programs wouldn't have negative consequences because you forgot to think about who makes the decision in a home. Is it always the man, the father, the head of household, or is it a joint shared decision, or who actually controls funds in a family income, etc.?
Well, was it also true that when somebody was going to leave the country to make money, it was always the man?
It was not always true. I I knew some people who had been in the U.S. Some women who had been in the U.S. By and large, I would say it was more men usually that I would meet them in Guatemala and they'd be like, oh, yeah, I used to live there, and they were in California or something for a couple years. And my most interesting story in Oklahoma Connection is that one of the guys who was in the U.S. before had been in Norman.
Oh.
So we had that connection. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And he worked at El Chico.
Oh.
And then he came back, and when I met him in Guatemala after he had, been abroad, he had created this cool little restaurant in the town where I worked and everything. So he opened a successful business, I think so.
Oh,
That was
great.
cool story.
Huh. But he didn't have that open while you were there, did he?
He did, because
He
he
did?
had been in the U.S. before he and I met, and then he had already returned by the time I met him.
Oh.
Yeah,
So you would go to his restaurant?
I would, because he made pizza. And that was hard to find.
I'll bet. Huh. Well, it sounds like you were doing, it sounds like a full-time job that was like any full-time job, at times enjoyable and at times really frustrating. Can you give me a couple of examples of the enjoyable part and maybe the frustrating part?
Oh gosh, enjoyable. So I really love my counterparts. I'm still in touch a little bit. It gets less and less every year, but we still have email and Facebook.
And who
and
is
stuff
that?
like that. My counterparts in the municipal
And
the city office. So one is El Ingeniero Contreras. Is what we call them El Inge, like engineer is a form of respect, sort of, like doctor but engineer. And then the other one is Juan Carlo Contreras. And then there was also a woman named Erica Castro, who was also, just really lovely to work with. Plus everybody else that worked in the town, it was like a community, and we'd all have lunch together and
Fellowship.
Fellowship, community support. They could tell sometimes that I was like feeling bad because they knew stuff that was going on with me, my family. Like my grandmother passed away while I was in the Peace Corps and stuff like that.
That's too bad.
Yeah, and so they were
You
aware
didn't come
of
back
that.
though, did you?
I did, because I was in Guatemala. It wasn't like as bad of a
No, but I mean,
ticket price.
when your grandmother died, you came back for her funeral.
I did, or
And
for
then-
yeah.
Huh?
I came back right before she passed away.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you heard about it and, okay. And then you went back.
And then I went back.
Okay.
But very supportive.
Did you give any thought to not going back? And when did this happen during your 2 years?
So at that point I was like, yeah, I'm going back. That wasn't a thought. But yes, definitely I thought about leaving, and that could, from time to time, where I was frustrated, getting to the second part of your question.
Okay.
And, just sort of feeling like, what am I contributing here? Like, I don't really feel sometimes taken seriously, or like, I just don't really feel like I have anything to add here, and I'm wasting my time, wasting other people's time.
I haven't talked to anybody who hasn't had that problem,
Yeah.
including me. Yeah, but the thing is, you can look at it as, well, I'm having a bad day, or I'm having a bad week, and it'll be over with. Is that the way you did it to get through these rough patches?
Yeah, there was usually like okay, I'll give it till the end of the week, or I'll give it till the end of the month. And it was sort of thinking incrementally like that. And then something else would happen that would be really nice again, work-wise or fellowship-wise.
There is one other option that many Peace Corps volunteers have had and taken, and that is they have arrived at the decision that their job was a dead-end job, that they didn't really enjoy it. So let me look around and see what else I can do. Did you ever do that?
I kept my eyes open for things like that, but I didn't ever stumble upon sort of a second job.
Did you tell any of your Peace Corps colleagues any of this? And that you were looking?
Oh yeah.
In Guatemala, I'm talking about.
Right. That was a point of constant conversation. I mean, again, like
everybody was doing it.
Right. They're all talking about, oh, this is going wrong. This is really frustrating. It was a great community for like venting and trying to learn from each other and change based on other people's successes, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we did that a lot, and so people would always be like, well, you could do this, or I'm doing that, or I heard so and so's doing this. So there wasn't a lack of ideas,
including coming up with ideas of your own.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay.
Right, but I just I did really want to stick with the municipality, and so I thought the mapping piece of the program could be interesting, and it was just I had to sort of accept, okay, this is much slower than I imagine it would go, and so there's just like taking steps back. But I always was personally trying to stick within that particular program.
What about your health during those 2 years?
So my health was pretty good. I had some weird things, like I got a really bad case of pink eye.
Oh, huh.
Yeah, oh, what's up?
Conjunctivitis.
Yeah, and it was probably from touching a dog or a pet or something, rubbing my eye. And then the next thing I knew, it had spread to both eyes, and it was bad enough that I had a headache, and like one of my eyes was swelling shut, like it was really bad.
Oh, wow.
And I went to the nurse. Luckily, it was an hour-long bus ride away. It wasn't like 16 hours or something.
Yeah.
And got it taken care of, but I also shared the information with my family in the States, and my aunt is a doctor, and after the fact she's like, I was really concerned. That was really extremely infected.
Yeah.
Like I was really concerned something was going to happen. So,
but you couldn't talk to your doctor relative.
Right. Well, I could, but I didn't usually. I usually would talk briefly to my parents on my cell phone. But that was the extent of it. And the medical staff in Peace Corps, they were really attentive.
Competent too?
Competent, yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So you got over your pink eye?
I got over my pink eye. Had lots of sort of chronic GI upset probably that I just didn't even realize after some point.
That reminds me too. Did you, when you got to your community, did Peace Corps tell you don't drink the water?
I'm pretty sure they did, yes.
And did you drink the water?
No.
So you boiled it?
I boiled the water, and then we could also buy like water coolers worth of water. That was sort of like the standard, because that's portable, you can take it to your...
But did you have a running supply of water?
I had...
You have pipes?
Yes, I had plumbing.
Mm-hmm.
But again, just like in my initial in-service place, at my permanent place, it was like the water was on for a day, or on for 2 hours in the morning, and then they turn it off. So you had to like store it up, turn on the faucet when you would hear it come on in the morning, because it would usually come on around 6 o'clock in the morning. Go ration out how much you thought you were going to need for bathing, cleaning, I think I usually used bottled water for cooking too, even though I boiled it.
Where'd you get the bottled water?
Well, the water cooler was purified water. Yeah.
Okay. Did anyone you know from your group go home early?
Yes.
How many? And what were the reasons, generally speaking?
I think about almost a third of our volunteers of my class went home. One, there were a couple of medical discharges.
Yeah.
Random things that come up. They're in good health normally, and they get there and just something random happens. They're young and healthy. And then also, at least 2 people decided it wasn't for them pretty early on. Some person left at the end of the in-service, or maybe 2 people did.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, yeah, I don't think this is going to work for me. And
Anybody try to talk them out of it?
I don't think so. I mean, I wasn't close enough with them. I think we all just sort of listened, because that's the other thing with Peace Corps. Like, everybody knows it's really hard, and you kind of think, oh, people are going to judge me if I quit. But actually, everybody in the Peace Corps has, as you were saying, I think you're saying anyway, has, had frustrations and thought about wanting to ET, early terminate at some point. And there's no disrespect for people that give up early on. They still.
What would you say were your main accomplishments in community development? It's limited just to community development for a minute. During your 2 years.
So they're not super huge. I facilitated some trainings for folks, and I also helped put the municipality connected them with some government funded resources to help them build their capacity and municipal development stuff. And then I also got us started, along with one of my counterparts, working on a comprehensive development plan. So we had something down on paper and continued to sort of build it out, but it never got passed or approved or anything like that. It wasn't priority.
Why not?
I think there was some corruption going on in my...
Ooh, corruption.
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah, I didn't really know. They kept things very separate from me, probably out of respect for me, but I think there was some mismanagement of funds, and that kind of came out. My friend who's there sent me an article after I had left. She's still there, but she's like, yeah, I think somebody went to jail, and on the city council, and somebody was fired, and so I think there was fund mismanagement, maybe embezzlement.
Well, that has nothing to do with you. You did your part. I mean, you and the others came up with a plan.
Right, exactly. But that helped explain some of the reason that there wasn't as much traction for some of my great ideas. They were focused on other things that I just would have no way to know about, which I think is good to
Did
realize.
you know about this corruption while you were there? I mean, did people say, hey, this guy, he took this money?
No, but I didn't. But there's definitely a political divide in that community, and probably a lot of communities.
A political divide?
Yeah,
Of what sort?
Between political parties. There's usually I guess 2 political parties, and so whoever at the local level wins the mayoral election, they can, it's just like here, kind of, they can appoint people and hire their staff, and they can fire some of their staff, but then they also have civil servant type of staff who just go in, but don't have, the mayor doesn't trust them to do anything, so they just go in and sit there all day because they don't have any duties assigned to them, but they can't be fired. So there's, resentment, I would say, between the two factions.
Their political parties were not based on any ideology, were they?
I did not explore that so much. I'm sure there is some ideology. I think one of them, I think usually the mayor is aligned with whoever the president is or was. At least, mayors tend to.
Because he wouldn't be mayor if he wasn't with the president?
Probably. He wouldn't have the funds to campaign and
wow, so
whatever.
That's really top down in Guatemala. It starts at the top. The president decides.
Even though there's a popular vote, but it's also such a small place. So I'm sure there is ideology, but it seems like every time there's a new president, they kind of recycle the same ideas.
Who was the president while you were there? Or did it even matter to you?
It didn't matter to me, and they used to call him the rabbit because he had buck teeth. That's what I remember. El Conejo. Berger. That was his last name.
Who?
Berger. Berger.
So
yeah, he was. Again, as a Peace Corps volunteer, you don't get involved in politics. You're supposed to not take sides, and so that helps.
And you were happy not to take sides and get involved in politics.
Yeah. I feel like that's an appropriate role for somebody.
Mm-hmm. I do too.
To be, and it helps relieve you of some responsibility, I suppose. But I also don't think foreigners should go into
You're
countries.
You're not there to get involved in their politics. That's
right.
And then you said you became a trainer during the end of your 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
How long were you a trainer?
I was a trainer for 2 different new classes. So for over a period of 3 months, I was also close to the training center, so I could go in more easily than some of the other volunteers. So that was, 1 day a week, every other week for 3 months.
Oh, not a big deal.
Not a big deal. Like, I think once I was there for 2 weeks as a, on site as a trainer or something like that.
As a trainer, did you ever spot a trainee who you thought was going to be exceptional, and you wanted everybody to know? And on the other hand, did you spot one that you thought, it's a bad attitude, just a negative person, and do what you could to get that person sent home? Anything like that?
So I don't think I deliberately tried to raise a profile of people I thought were promising, but definitely you're like, oh, that person's weird, or they say some stuff that's doesn't really seem like they're fitting in with the spirit of Peace Corps. But I never tried to nobody was ever bad enough for me to be like, oh, I've got to make it my agenda to get this person sent home or something like that.
Yeah.
Those kinds of people usually eventually, I'm not the only one that would catch on to those kinds of things. So, yeah. Did you?
Let's see.
Or have you come across that?
No. I haven't asked that question to too many people also. It's funny that I don't have canned questions. I just ask questions as they come up, just kind of spontaneously based on me more, because that's who I know best, So I'm thinking about stuff that I might have seen or might have thought about, but that's where a lot of these questions come from.
Okay.
Let's see. So at the end of your 2 years, did you consider at all re-upping for another year?
I think I considered for 1 day or something, because the idea of me staying on as like a full-time trainer was getting floated in a volunteer capacity, but just to be doing training and more of like the working at the Peace Corps training center, I guess. But that didn't last too long, and I was really ready to move on.
Really ready.
Go back home
Yeah.
and.
And did you have an idea what you wanted to do when you got home?
I did, because I had started applying for jobs, and I had gotten a tentative job offer to work for USAID.
Boy, what do you mean by tentative now?
Well, it's again just the government conditional, so they're like, pending, you pass all of these, medical tests and security clearances and reference checks and everything, and you can come the day we want you to.
And the budget doesn't go away.
And the budget doesn't go away. All these things, we'll offer you the job, or we'll give it to you. And so I had a fairly stable offer, but it wasn't completely a done deal. But it was looking good.
So you were quite hopeful coming home that you were going to have this job with AID.
That's right.
And did you get it?
I did, but it took a long time still. It took,
What's that?
Getting onboarded.
Months?
Yeah.
Ooh.
I came home in November, and I started at USAID in May.
Oh, yeah, that is quite a spell.
And that was after the contingent offer, so. But that's I've learned that's how USAID works. I think it's part of the screening process.
And didn't you say that you work for USAID now?
That's right.
So
yeah,
you've had that job continuously.
Almost, yeah.
Huh.
I took a few years off when I got married and moved to Oklahoma, and worked at Feed the Children and did some consulting work, and then found my way back.
Where were you when you got this AID job?
Well, while I was in Peace Corps, I applied and got called for an interview. So I went to Washington from Guatemala for that interview. Yeah.
That's amazing.
I know. It sounds like a perfect story, but it certainly didn't feel like it at the time. just the waiting and the stop and go aspects of it, but
it had a happy ending.
It had a happy ending, right? But so then, by the time I was leaving Guatemala, I had the interview, and I had like an email saying, "We'd like to offer you this job pending your medical tests or whatever."
Yeah.
Luckily, I had all of my medical tests because of Peace Corps, though.
Oh,
so that was I could actually do some of the medical testing and use that for that part of the job. So that was
good.
Pretty awesome.
Very good. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So, where was your office? AID.
So I was a Foreign Service officer, and I was based in Washington for 6 months. Yeah, about 6 months, and got assigned to go to Peru. So after being in Washington doing like training again, in-service stuff, I went to Peru for about 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Where in Peru?
Lima. So USAID is usually located on the U.S. Embassy compound. Mm-hmm. So I did that, and then I got assigned to go to Uganda in Kampala, and then after that I got assigned to Washington.
Where did you find time to get married in all this globe-trotting that you're doing?
Owner and I met online, so during my evenings, I guess. And then when I was on what they call home leave, you get that every once in a while, like a month's worth of time to be back, reacclimatized to being in the U.S. So I met him. This is where my parents had retired back to, from Arizona. And so we met, and then
And you met him where?
Here in Oklahoma. We
Oh.
met online, but
Yeah.
I met him in person
And so your
here.
parents retired to Oklahoma.
Right.
Hmm.
So I would
Okay.
spend my home leaves and some of my other vacations visiting them when I was coming back from Peru
Yeah.
and Uganda.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you met him here in Norman? Okay. How long ago was that, and what is his name?
I met him in 2012, and his name is Onur Civi.
Can you spell that?
Yeah, Onurcivi.
Mm-hmm.
And he is from Turkey originally, but he's been here forever. He moved here for grad school.
Mm-hmm.
Went to OSU, and then has
So he's not perfect.
stayed. So what's that?
So he's not perfect.
It depends on who you ask, I guess.
Yeah, that's right.
I can claim both OU and OSU kind of in my
Yes.
family, I guess, with him. Yeah, and so
What does he do?
he's a software engineer.
A what?
A software engineer.
Oh, okay.
He develops
Okay.
banking software for credit unions, basically.
A lot of Peace Corps volunteers RPCVs that I've interviewed have used the word transformative when they're describing their experience with Peace Corps. Is that a word you would use, or is that a little strong?
I think it is transformative. I like to think my other early experiences abroad where I had to figure everything out. I had to find a job, I had to find a house, I had to figure out how I was going to get paid. Getting from the airport and training like in Venezuela, like that was also transformative.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
in Peace Corps, a lot of things, even though it may not feel like it, a lot of things are set up for you. You have health insurance, you have a job assignment, you have a clear supervisor, you have a paycheck, you have somebody to help you find housing.
A job to do.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. You don't have to go out and look around.
Right.
They tell you.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of decisions made for you, and you still have flexibility, but it still was different because it was in a much more impoverished of a setting than like in Venezuela. Even like Venezuela, we wouldn't have water sometimes, but I was still in a city, and there was a metro, and there was there was a lot to offer, and in Guatemala, it was working with very poor people for very poor people, and in Venezuela, I was teaching business English. So the exposure to what that's like, what it's like to be in sort of a long-term development program or project, and all the bumps in the road and little successes that you have to just claim them for what they are.
Yeah. Did you have to disabuse a lot of Guatemalans about all Americans being rich? Or did they even think that?
I think they thought as a generalization, Guatemalan culture can be very reserved and polite at first. So that wouldn't really come up. I think there were assumptions that weren't stated. And I mean, I went home for my, interview. I went home for my job interview. I went home for my grandma's funeral. It wasn't like I was trying to pretend that I didn't have resources.
Right.
Either. So, I mean, people could draw their own conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew I had traveled before and stuff like that, so.
Now, is there any story that you would like to tell that you had thought about telling during the interview, and it just you didn't think about it at the right time or at all, and now you might? About your Peace Corps experience.
Gosh.
And if the answer is no, then it's no.
Yeah, I don't think I've covered a lot of the high points already. So I think I'm good. This was really fun to talk about, and Scott said you were a good interviewer, and you are. This was a lot of fun.
Well, thank you, thank you. I think that'll do it then.
Okay.